The forest loomed ahead like a living memory, its ancient trees whispering forgotten names through the late autumn mist. The Blackwood Forest had long stood untouched, not out of reverence, but fear. Elara had heard the tales whispered in trembling tones around hearths of vanishing children, of travelers driven mad by voices in the trees. But desperation speaks louder than legend. Elara's grip on Finn's hand tightened as they stepped past the rotted wooden marker that once read no entry, now covered in moss and decay. She was 17, hardened by responsibility, and her 12-year-old brother was the only soft thing left in her world. Their mother's breath had grown shallow in recent days, and the healer's only hope lay deep within this cursed woodland. The elusive moon petal. The forest swallowed sound as quickly as it devoured light. Even the crunch of leaves beneath their boots seemed dulled, absorbed by the dense fog that coiled around their legs. Finn walked closely, his eyes darting to every crooked branch and hollow trunk. "Elara," he whispered. "Why does it feel like the trees are listening?" "They're just trees," she replied. More to herself than to him, but the silence that followed was suffocating. No birdsong, no rustle of hidden life, just the wet breath of the mist, curling between trees that arched above them like cathedral ceilings, pressing the world into perpetual twilight. They followed an old hunter's path, nearly invisible beneath layers of leaf mold and detritus. According to the healer, the moon petal bloomed only in the hidden glade. A clearing so deep within Blackwood, it was more myth than map. A place marked by unnatural stillness and a creeping cold that never lifted. Hours passed, or what felt like hours. Time felt pliable in the forest. Finn's cheeks were flushed with cold, and Elara pulled him closer beneath her cloak. She didn't say it aloud, but the path had changed behind them. Trees they had passed now leaned at different angles, their bark etched with markings she hadn't noticed before. Sharp, spiraling symbols that twisted her stomach to look at. It was then they heard it, a moan, low and guttural, threading through the trees like wind through a keyhole. It wasn't the forest, she told herself. Not a creature. Just the wind. But Finn stopped in his tracks. "What was that, Elara?" His voice trembled, full of restrained panic. She swallowed her own fear. "Just the wind," she lied. The glade appeared like a dreamscape, hidden behind a curtain of ivy and crooked branches. The moment they stepped into it, the mist thickened, but not with moisture. It felt alive, pressing against their skin, clinging like unseen hands. The ground was carpeted in a strange moss that silenced even the faintest footstep. At the center grew a cluster of moon petals, glowing faintly with a bluish hue. Elara approached, heart pounding. She reached down, but froze. The ground whispered, not leaves rustling, not wind. Whispers, fragmented sentences, half-formed thoughts. Some her own, some not. "You'll fail them. He'll die because of you. Leave him." She grabbed the flower and stuffed it into her satchel. Finn clung to her side now, eyes locked on the trees. "They're watching us," he murmured. Elara looked up. Shadows shifted between the trunks, formless and fleeting. Shapes that didn't move like animals. Shapes that stood too still, watching, waiting. They turned to leave, but the way they came was no longer there. The ivy curtain had twisted shut, now resembling a wall of vines and thorns. The trees beyond were unfamiliar. The glade had turned on itself, an ever-changing labyrinth designed to disorient. The mist pulsed and the whispers grew louder. Elara tried to reassure Finn, but her voice came out brittle. Every step away from the glade tightened a noose of dread around them. They moved in circles. Paths looped back into themselves. Trees wore the same twisted scars. Then they saw her, a woman in white just ahead, walking between the trees. Silent, graceful, barefoot. "Hello?" Elara called. The woman turned. Her face was a blurred smear, like a painting left in the rain. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Then she pointed, not toward escape, but deeper into the trees, and vanished. Finn began to cry softly. Elara hugged him close, her fingers trembling against his back. They had crossed from forest to something else entirely. This place wasn't just haunted. It was hungry. It wanted them to lose hope. That was the first test. The weaver was still unseen, but its presence hung like a pressure in the air. The deeper they went, the more distorted the forest became. Colors inverted. Trees bent in impossible angles. Time fractured. They saw versions of themselves. Hollow-eyed, broken, whispering warnings they could not understand. Elara tried to lead them toward light, but there was no sun here. Only fog and illusion. She began to doubt herself, her strength, her choices. Was she leading Finn to salvation or doom? The forest echoed her insecurities back to her in mocking tones, repeating her thoughts like echoes from the void. They passed a pond, perfectly still, its surface like glass. Finn approached it, mesmerized. "Mama's in there," he said, pointing. Elara looked and saw their mother's reflection in the water, frail, pale, eyes pleading. But the real pond held no reflection at all. Just darkness. She pulled Finn back. The forest had shown her a lie. It could see their thoughts, their memories. It could use love against them. That was his true weapon, not claws or teeth, but despair, confusion, grief. Then the voices began to take form. From behind the trees, silhouettes emerged, translucent figures with vacant eyes, whispering endlessly. Some were children, some older. All looked lost. All spoke in riddles about roads that vanished and homes they could never return to. Finn spoke with one, a small boy with a broken smile. "You'll forget who you are," he said. "And she'll forget you. That's when you become one of us." Elara dragged him away, but the boy followed for a while, walking backward, never blinking. They found a clearing with stones arranged in a spiral, blackened by time. Elara didn't want to step inside, but the forest pressed from behind. In the center stood a twisted totem of roots and bone, and as they neared it, the air grew colder, tighter. They had entered the weaver's lair. At first, there was nothing. Just silence so absolute, it made their ears ring. Then the shadows moved, coalesced, grew. The weaver did not step from the trees. It unfolded from them, its shape shifting between tendrils and wings, its voice a chorus of regrets. "I see you, Elara." It knew her, knew every failure, every buried doubt. It showed her visions, her mother's funeral, Finn's lifeless body, her own hands stained by grief. She screamed and covered her ears, but the images bloomed inside her mind like poison. Finn screamed too, and the sound brought her back. He was clutching his head, tears streaming down his face. "Make it stop," he begged. Elara pulled him close. "You're not alone. I'm here. I'm here." The weaver hissed, displeased. It struck again, not with force, but with memory. It recreated their home, warm and safe, with the scent of stew and firelight. Their mother called them. Finn broke away, running toward the illusion. Ilara barely caught him in time. "You have to fight it," she cried. "It feeds on what we fear, what we want." Her voice grew stronger. "But it can't take what we hold on to. It can't take what's real." Finn clung to her, sobbing, but nodded. The weaver began to unravel, his form dissolving into ash-black threads that stretched from tree to tree, weaving a cage around them. It spoke now in many voices, some familiar, some foreign. The forest screamed with it, wind turning sharp and bitter. Ilara knew they couldn't run. There was no path, only confrontation. She stood tall, placing herself between Finn and the shadows. "You can show me my failures," she shouted into the mist. "But they won't break me. I'm not here because I'm strong. I'm here because I have no choice. And I won't let you take him." Her voice trembled, but her stance did not. For a moment, the mist recoiled. The shadows twitched. The weaver paused, as if considering her defiance. Then it shifted again, trying one last time. Ilara was alone now. Finn was gone. The forest around her was silent and unfamiliar. Her breath came quick, panic setting in. But this illusion was weaker than before. She remembered the weight of Finn's hand, his warmth, the sound of his laugh, fragile but real. She screamed his name, over and over, tearing at the illusion with her voice. "You are my brother, and I will find you, no matter what this place wants me to believe." Her scream pierced the dream, and with it, the shadows fractured. The ground trembled beneath her feet. The trees groaned as if wounded. From the heart of the glade, a cry answered Finn's voice, calling her name, desperate and small. She ran. She found him kneeling in front of the totem again, his hands over his ears, surrounded by ghostly figures who whispered, beckoned, begged. Ilara charged forward, scattering them with her will alone. They vanished like smoke as she wrapped her arms around him. "I've got you," she whispered. "We go together." The glade howled. The weaver screamed in a voice that shook the bones of the earth. The mist began to dissipate, ripped away by an unseen wind. For the first time, light filtered through the trees, faint and golden, like the edge of a dream. The way out had opened. They stumbled through it, hand in hand, barely able to stand. Behind them, the trees closed like a curtain, sealing the glade away. The whispers faded. The cold lifted. The silence was no longer suffocating but serene. Ilara looked down. Her satchel was still with her. The moon petal still glowed faintly within. They emerged from the forest's edge into fading daylight. The world felt sharper, realer. Finn collapsed into the grass, staring up at the sky with a vacant look of disbelief. Ilara sat beside him, silent for a long while. Their journey had been a dream, a nightmare, and something more. When they returned home, the healer worked quickly. The moon petal was brewed into a tincture and given to their mother. Within days, her breathing eased, her color returned. She would recover, but Ilara and Finn would never be the same. Something inside them had changed. They didn't speak of the weaver or the voices or the forest. Not at first, but in quiet moments, they would glance at each other and know they had lived through something few would believe. something older than legend, something that had tried to unmake them. Alara no longer questioned her strength. She knew it was born not from the absence of fear, but from facing it with love as her shield. And Finn, once timid, carried a strange calmness now, a silent wisdom gained at great cost. They had stared into the abyss and returned whole. The Blackwood Forest remained vast and unmoved. Others would still whisper of its curse, its glade, its shadows. But no one would dare go as deep as they had. Not again. Some places are not meant to be found, not by the curious, not by the brave, only by the desperate. And yet, sometimes desperation reveals the truth of a person. In that cursed glade, amidst despair and illusion, a brother and sister proved that the strongest light comes not from magic, but from the quiet, steady fire of devotion. A love that does not yield, even in the presence of ancient watching horrors.